So I believe when film animation was created in the mid or say late 1800s, people were amazed. But then there was one guy that was like, that's cool and all, but where's the titties? So then, many decades later, a man came along to fill the boobless void. And that man is legendary cartoonist, writer, and director Ralph Bakshi. And he's considered a pioneer in adult animation. Bakshi has inspired directors from Gore Verbinski to Quentin Tarantino. He's received awards for his work, and 4 of his films made the top 100 animated films of all time, according to the Online Film Critics Society. So, Tyler, you're probably asking, what is Ralph Bakshi's backstory? Well, I'm going to tell you guys. The guy was born in Israel on October 29th, 1938. And his family moved to a predominant African-American neighborhood in Brooklyn the following year. And by his teens, he took up cartooning, and by 18, was working at the studio Terry Toons as a cell polisher. He eventually worked his way up to director and got his animation superhero parody series, The Mighty Heroes, to be added to a segment on CBS Saturday morning cartoon Mighty Mouse in 1966. But Bakshi was dissatisfied with the quality of the show, so he left CBS to become head of the animation division at Paramount. And he worked with artists like Mad Magazine's Harvey Kurtzman and Wally Wood, as well as Archie Goodwin and Gray Marrow, who worked with Marvel and DC. Then, by 1969, Ralph created his own studio called Bakshi Productions, where he hired more females and minority animators at higher salaries. Ralph was uninterested in mainstream studio animation films and wanted to make more personal, provocative, and sometimes raunchy pictures, thus leading to the gauntlet of mature cartoons he produced throughout the 70s and part of the 80s. And possibly due to the constant stifleness of his creativity, Bakshi retired from animation in 2000 to paint as well as teach undergrad animation classes. He still remains active in television as a director on things like the Mighty Mouse New Adventures cartoon, the HBO series Spicy City, and even voice work on an episode for Ren and Stimpy's Adult Party cartoon. But regardless of his years of success, he will be dead someday. Mm-hmm. So what better time than now to pay respects by ranking his full-length films from worst to best. And I must warn you guys that the 2015 product Last Days of Coney Island will not be on this list because it's actually a short film. So before I get into my list, you're actually a little bit younger. What do you know about Bakshi's work and some of the movies you saw before we did this?
So I actually didn't know too much about Ralph Bakshi, because I'm not huge into animation, but when I found out that he did the animated like Lord of the Rings, it kind of got me wondering, well, what is this guy about? I think he does a lot better when he has like a fantasy element implemented into his stories, but he doesn't shy away from being controversial. He essentially is like, these boundaries, like social and whatever we have. Yeah, no, I'm just going to be the pompous artist and you go straight through them. And how am I going to do that? Animation.
All right. So without further ado, here is my list of Ralph Bakshi's worst to best animated full-length films. Coming in at number 9, no surprise to the Bakshi fans, is Cool World from 1992. So in Ralph Bakshi's defense, this is not the film he wanted to make. He wanted to have it be a more animated horror movie, and then the screenplay ended up being changed by the studio, and the original content was toned down. They wanted to go from the R rating that he originally had to a PG-13 rating. And then with Paramount threatening to sue him if he didn't make the film, Bakshi reluctantly agreed. Having said that, his name's on the film, so he shares blame for this piece of shit. So yeah. The problem is, considering that the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit was an animated live-action masterpiece in 1988, any movie that attempts the same formula will be compared to that film and then scrutinized, in most cases, rightfully so. Like your movies like Space Jam, The Looney Tunes Back in Action, and even that new Tom and Jerry cartoon movie that just came out. Yeah. People always say in their review, they bring up the Roger Rabbit movie. So Cool World was no exception to this rule. So in case you guys don't know, the movie stars what's the guy's name? Gabriel Burns. He's an ex-con cartoonist named Jack, and he created the Cool World. And he has like a sexy femme fatale like main character or doodle named Hollywood, who's like voiced by Kim Basinger. And she pulls him into the Cool World to have sex with him.
Every weeaboo's fantasy.
Yeah, which will turn her into live action. And then when that does happen, Kim actually plays a live action version of the character. So I read actually the sex with the cartoon plot was actually something that Bakshi originally had in the script. So I guess he was happy they kept that.
Yeah.
A young Brad Pitt is the only non-animated person that lives in Cool World, and he plays Detective Frank trying to catch Holly. So this movie is like kind of like an animated film noir comedy that lacks any humor.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw it. What did you think of it?
So when I was younger, I would see this ad for this movie, and I even remember like the NES game. But then I'm like, it looks interesting. It looks like Roger Rabbit. How bad could it be? Flash forward 10 years, and I'm like, wow, the Paramount really with this movie. God damn.
Yeah, you can tell there's like all these different ideas trying to be forced together in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that Bakshi told the animators, like, he's like, you know what, do whatever you want. Like, cause as long as you're amused with it, because I don't give a shit. And you can tell because there's like random like cartoons like popping up in scenes, like characters like running around in images and they just disappear. It's like, what is happening? And the biggest problem with the movie is the composition from animation mixed with the live action. It is not convincing. You can tell it's just a guy that's acting to nothing and they draw it in later. And that's just like the bare minimum of the problem with the movie. There's like, obviously plot lines and story arcs, and it's just so difficult to get to this mess of a film. What did you think of the actual character Hollywood?
I feel like if Horny had a female personification, but also, again, that femme fatale, she would be it.
Yeah. I just found her annoying because she had a really whispery voice, and when she would talk, she would just drag out her point. But shockingly, she was 10 times more annoying when she became live action. She had no social skills at all, as compared to when she was in the cartoon world. I'll admit that she was hot though, just like you said, man. But I thought that the waitress, I guess her name was Lynette, she had a more attractive personality, which was Brad Pitt's love interest. And I also like the design of the character Nails, who was like Frank's partner, the giant spider with the gloves on. But yeah, this movie is awful. So moving on. Coming in at number 8, got Hey Good Looking from 1982. And this movie, and I'll tell you guys why, it might be shocking to you all, but this takes place in 1950s Brooklyn. And it stars a guy named Vinny, who's the leader of a gang called the Stompers, right? And he leads his vulgar, reckless, like greaser life. And he's got an even wilder friend named Crazy Shapiro. And then basically while he's on the black area of the beach, he runs into Boogaloo Jones, who sets up a rumble between the Stompers and his gang called the Chaplains that night. So Vinny desperately is attempting to round up his reluctant crew while witnessing like occasional violence and murder. But he still finds time in the day to publicly molest his old flame, Rozzy, who's, I'll say, she's not only pretty goddamn cute, but she got an annoying voice. Am I right about this? Did Vinny used to babysit her years ago? Was that what was established in the scene at the basketball court?
I think that was a very offhand comment. I'm sorry, but I can't go any further without saying that he looks like Christopher Walken if he was a cartoon.
Okay.
So young Christopher Walken, greaser man, babysitting a very attractive young lady. It just kind of creates a weird image in your mind. I'm like, and now you're going to date the girl that you babysat? What? My
problem with the movie start off is their relationship is so underdeveloped because it's like you never establish why they're together. And I guess that's why she cheats on him like towards the end of the movie. Dude, that friend that she has named Eva, that girl loves making sandwiches. And also, I thought that was the first time I ever seen people have sex in a pile of cheeseburgers. So that was kind of shocking. Crazy Shapiro. irked the out of me. The biggest problem I had is his off the hinge personality and what he would do. But then at the end, he has this like unexplained hallucination during like the gang shootout, and it caused him like shoot randomly at things, like including like talking TV antennas. I'm like, the is happening? What'd you think of like the gang fight at the end, which is basically, I felt like the movie was selling this is going to be like greatest part of the film.
Yeah, there was like the big lead up. Okay, this is gonna be the climax of the movie. Okay, I don't know. I felt it was a letdown because it didn't really sell it too much. And then there's crazy just trying to shoot everyone on the top. I'm like, can't even get a good fight. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I totally sympathize with his dad that was often trying to kill him in the movie. So the rumble at the end is kind of like got this like dancey sequence at the beginning, all of like West Side Stories. But I found the plot wasn't interesting, and it seemed to like meander around like the whole Italian greaser stereotype and boobies, and the ending was a big disappointment.
Yeah.
And I heard that they actually have an unreleased version of this movie that Bakshi did back in 1975. So I figured that one's probably better. All right, coming in at number 7, you got Fire and Ice from 1983. Okay. This is a more grown-up and slightly sensual version of He-Man. And not saying that He-Man wasn't like a vision of ruggedness. If you're into that, I'm just saying that they're basically the same kind of characters. They got both young, muscular barbarians that wear very little clothing. I think I know why you like this movie so much.
Hey.
This is like a fantasy film that, obviously Tyler said he's into that kind of stuff, where like an evil ice queen named Julianne and her son Necron use waves of glaciers to overtake a land of Firekeep. They use this plan to kidnap King Jarrell's daughter Tigra, so she can become Necron's bride. And during her capture, Tigra escapes and comes across a warrior survivor named Lorne. And while alone in the jungle, they fight off like Neanderthal troops, hungry wolves, and even a giant squid. And they use a technique that is called rotoscoping. Bakshi uses a lot in his movies, where they take like a live action and they draw over it to make the actual animation look more realistic in their movement. I like what he's doing in this. And this is like a PG rating movie. So this is Bakshi like doing a kid-friendly movie, which he attempted a couple more times we'll get into. But some of it can still be arousing. Like the scene when the ice formations are erecting from the ground. And or if you have like a bloodlust for people getting like pierced with like axes or like, swords and stuff, might turn you on. But I think the most titillating thing is the scantily clad Princess Tigra. And I'm watching this movie, I'm like, man, if I was older when I saw this movie and two-dimensional, but almost every scene has her bent over like a thong and focused on her cleavage and lots of panting and moaning from her. And the actress that does the voice is Maggie Roswell. You might know her for doing a lot of voice characters on The Simpsons. So I thought, Tyler, this is a reason why you enjoyed this film. But you're saying no, it's you're not that shallow?
I don't know. It was just like sure, I thought it was an original story. And you know what? It was more of a visual experience because there wasn't too much dialogue. And if he did use dialogue, it was for very important scenes.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I found that the story was really basic and a lot of slow parts, but I agree with you when it's entertaining and it's got charm to it. And there's a character I really liked in the movie. His name was Dark Wolf, and he was tough as shit, dude. Like,
okay. They did give him a name. I just call him Barbarian Batman.
Yeah, he was like a kind of got this like wise Native American vibe, and like the voice he was doing as well. At the end, there's just other movies he did that were better, and we're gonna get into them right now. Coming in at number 6, we got The Lord of the Rings. I feel there's no point like telling you guys the plot of this. It's basically the Fellowship of the Ring portion of the J.R.R. Tolkien novel. And they also include parts from the Two Towers as well. And at over 2 hours, this is Bakshi's longest film. But I still feel like when Peter Jackson saw this movie, he said, I can make this longer. So yeah, the animation is pretty good. The use of rotoscoping throughout, a lot during like the epic battle scenes, they use it. And I found that the voice of Frodo sounded exactly like Elijah Woods in the Peter Jackson version. And I found the guy that voiced Gandalf sounded just like Ian McKellen. I'm like, wow, it's really amazing how well those actors were able to mimic the voices from this movie that came out in 1978.
Yeah.
So I compare this to the Rankin Bass animated film, The Hobbit, which I saw as a kid, but a lot less singing.
Yeah.
But for me, the reason why it's this low on my list is I've never been a fan of the Lord of the Rings films. I have the same opinion of them as Randall Dudds in Clerks 2, but you can tell Bakshi did his best to stay true to the source material.
Yeah. I mean, this was a very interesting take on the book, because it was, I think, one of the first adaptations, but it's still very beautiful. Like, I watch it sometimes just for like the stunning visuals.
Yeah, I like the character design too. Like the way the hobbits walk in there, they have that waddle down really good.
Yeah.
There's lots of parts that it feels like it drags like in the middle. I didn't get interested in this story until Gollum showed up, and that's like over halfway through. I think the problem is that you can tell this movie's incomplete because Ralph had a second part planned, and the movie just cuts off. And I guess they had some disagreement with the studio, so that the progress never happened. So I have to ding it for that, because you're like, all right, then what happens? And it's like, that's it. But he was able to take another movie with the same concept and have his own idea. And it makes my number 5 on the list. And that is Wizards from 1977.
Okay.
Now, this is one of the movies you've seen before we did this thing, right?
Yes, I've seen, actually, Wizards was the movie that got me back into Bakshi and looking at some of his stuff. I would also like to say he liked the word necro, like that prefix, because he uses it for two like characters in his movies so far.
Right. Yeah. So this movie, I feel like the story is too complex to explain. So all you gotta know is there's 2 wizards. They're brothers. One's named Avatar. He's a good one. The other one's named Black Wolf. He's the evil one. They've been at war for 3,000 years in this like post-apocalyptic Middle Earth that they have going on. There's like so much convoluted like exposition throughout the movie to like explain to the next scene, and they use like still drawings for that. I think that in the narration, when they do that, I think it's really good. I really like the Avatar character when he gets older, because he's got this raspy old Jewish man voice. He's got like this great one-liners, but I've got to be honest, it's kind of pervy with like the president's daughter who's named Eleanor. You remember that part when he's like, why don't you just sit while I think and look at your chest?
Yeah. And she's just like, okay, freeze frame for 2 seconds.
Yeah. But making Black Wolf a Nazi seemed like random. I'm like, why are they going with the Nazi route? But when they explain it, I'm like, you know what? I gotta admit, it's effective for routing like the mutant demons. Those mutant demons, they're basically like stormtroopers, but funnier and more incompetent. Remember they killed Fritz scene? That was
how
hilarious, dude.
How could I not?
Yeah. And speaking of Star Wars, I said earlier, Mark Hamill does like a voice for a character named Sean the Fairy, and this is before Star Wars, so this is like his first like major role. I think like what this movie has going really well for is the battle scenes are brutal, but the final fight between Avatar and Black Wolf is my problem. It was so underwhelming because it's like the same ending as Kill Bill Part 2 is the same way they handle this battle. So if you really dive in, it's really intellectually deep, and like the whole war between magic and technology is some interesting metaphor that they have for science and religion, I think.
And also, I love how the first like 15 minutes of let's play who's the main character game. Which one of these is our main character? Oh my God, he's dead. I guess it's the other dude because they look exactly alike.
You just gave me a good segue to the next movie because they do the exact same thing you're saying, waiting for who's the main character. And that's coming in number 4 is the movie American Pop from 1981. And this is a linear story of the Russian Jewish mother and her son who immigrates to America. And it chronologicalizes the sons of each generation's career in the music business throughout the 20th century. They use mainstream music from the very popular artists throughout the film. Got artists like Sam Cooke, Jimi Hendrix, Lou Reed, Bob Seger, and even Pat Benatar at the end. All the music is like played throughout the movie. And I read that the music licensing was so expensive The movie didn't come out on VHS until 1998. So they got the live action clips throughout with like that intertwines with the particular decade. So it's animation mixed with live action, and then they actually show a still frame or a clip of something that happened in history at the same time. But they're using lots of rotoscoping in this movie. Actually, I think most of the movie is rotoscoping, and I think it looks amazing. And I think what Tyler said is for the last movie we were talking about is interesting, because this movie, we go through like 4 family generations before we're introduced in the main character. And that would be the character Tony. He's shown after like the untimely death of his father, whose own rabbi grandfather is killed at the beginning of the film. So do you find that interesting? Like, you're like, oh, I guess we're following, no, I guess not. We're following this character. No, I guess not. And then finally we're like, okay, we're following this character because he's been on the screen for more than 10 minutes.
I was more confused by, this is a story about American music told by 4 generations of musicians. Okay, awesome. Why are we starting in Russia? Did not expect it to start like Godfather Part 2.
Yeah. So there's a lot of historical things on the backdrop, and I'm like, damn, I'm learning so much from this movie. Like, apparently there was a war in Germany. Did you know that? I'm kidding you guys. I did know, obviously, about Nazi Germany. But the thing about the triangle shirtwaist factory fire, never heard of that. That happens in the beginning of the movie. And I thought that was really interesting. I'm learning, and at the same time, I'm really entertained by the music they're playing. It does a great job setting the stage for each period of time, whether they're doing big band music, swing music, jazz, folk, psychedelic rock, heartland rock, and then they got punk rock music towards the end. The only thing that I didn't understand was when Tony was writing the songs for like that band he met in San Francisco. And then they were
not Jefferson Airplane.
I thought it was weird because it was like, did anyone notice that these are songs that were already recorded?
That kind of took me out, because if you know like who these artists are, I'm like, you're thinking, did Tony actually do songs for Jefferson Airplane? Did the front person of Jefferson Airplane actually OD? What the hell happened? Wait.
Yeah. I expected the girl to be like, this is a Bob Dylan song. We can't sing this. I just love the visual of the film, because it's a really psychedelic acid trip scene that they shoot in like a fisheye lens. And the movie is pretty much a love letter to all the different waves of American music without all the blatant sex and racism that we're used to from his movies. And it's really coherent film. I have to give him credit for that, because now we're getting to ones that are less coherent, but are like basically the staple of Bakshi's career. And I guess we're getting into the ones that made you feel uncomfortable, Tyler. Going into number 3, we got Heavy Traffic from 1973. This is a really trippy animated live action film about a young man named Michael Corleone dealing with like the hectic and sometimes dangerous lifestyle of New York City life. And the film opens and ends with live action with like moments of that sprinkled throughout the animation portion of the film. So I gotta say, if you love pinball machines and domestic violence, you'll enjoy this film. Now,
very niche market for those things.
Yeah. I know a lot of people have put this movie as his masterpiece, including Bakshi himself, but I will get into like the small problem with the film. The character Michael, he's a struggling cartoonist. So a cartoonist that's meta as hell. He's got an angry mobster father named Angelo and a Jewish mother named Ida. And the dad is often beating the hell out of her while she's throwing axes and knives at him. And Michael forms a criminal hustle and an eventual semi-romantic relationship with like a black bartender named Carol. This angers his racist father to put a hit on his son, as most forgiving Italian fathers do. So I guess I want to know your thoughts on this movie as your first time watching it.
I was very confused by the whole pinball thing, but I'm like, oh, okay, it's life is like a game of pinball. I don't know the full meaning of that simile, metaphor, analogy.
You need Forrest Gump to explain it to you.
Life is like a game of pinball. Sometimes you just gotta tilt the cabinet. I can see where people are saying that this is like his magnum opus. It's got very unique style. It's got very unique story. And I think this is Bakshi at his most Bakshi-ist. It's an X rating in a box. I think that's about it.
Yes, this is the second X-rated movie, and I have to say, I like the animation is kind of different with the characters. You got some
Yeah.
that look like real people. You got some that look like actual cartoon characters. They use like sketch animation in a couple scenes, and I have to say, this has got to be like the most gratuitous nudity that he's done in all his movies, and I'm not complaining. Now, getting into like the problematic things, I feel like the movie displays gay people in the 70s as like sex crazed, like cross dressers who prey on like unsuspecting homophobes. You call that?
Yeah, I remember that scene.
Michael's character seems to be like a product of a racist woman abusing environment, but I don't find him likable. The guy is such a virgin; he can't even like get laid without accidentally killing somebody with his clumsiness.
Yeah.
I mean, he does like get some later, but it's against his will. My other big problem is like they really dragged out the ending to the point where it's like this movie could have ended like 4 times. So I have to ding it because the ending, he totally dropped the ball on that. And unlike this number 2 movie we have on the list, and that is Coonskin from 1975. Really soulful, upbeat folk song opens the movie by Scatman Crothers. I have a feeling that Tyler was feeling mad awkward because it's not only a song that is really good, but a song he cannot sing.
Mm-hmm.
It begins with live action with the preacher and his partner Samson driving to break their friend Randy out of prison. And before they arrive, Randy and his cellmate Poppy are waiting right outside the prison walls. And this is when Poppy decides it's a good time to tell a story of 3 guys who started a crime organization in Harlem. And the story is told in animation with the characters Brother Rabbit, Brother Bear, and Preacher Fox. So you get like a Brer Rabbit comparison going here. And the people that do the voices are the same live action characters. You got Barry White doing the Bear's voice. You got Philip Michael Thomas doing Brother Rabbit, and you might know him as Detective Tubbs from Miami Vice.
Okay.
And then you got Scatman Crothers, who you might know as the voice of Hong Kong Phooey. I think the animation is great. I love the character design of Brother Rabbit, like with the whole droopy ears. You might see it on surface level as a racist looking movie, but actually what Bakshi's doing is satirizing the Black characters and blackface minstrels that they used to draw in those Looney Tune cartoons back in the 40s.
See, this is what makes me a little uncomfortable is that I feel like there's some things you just can't satirize, such as, the mammy archetype, blackface, and the tar rabbit. I will say that the Black Jesus thing definitely threw me for a loop.
Yeah. I said in the last movie, they do it again. The usual stereotypical depiction of flamboyant gay people, as well as the racist cops and mafia that you see in Bakshi films is here. But it's very captivating crime story of a Black bunny overtaking a mobster's illegal financial racket with plenty of violence, nudity, racial dialogue, and pretty visual acid trip that leads to a sexual assault, blackface, and then eventually multiple homicides. Trigger happy cops and the black skin seems to always end in tragedy. I like the seedy crime infested look of the 70s New York, and the music I thought throughout was authentic. But I felt like at some point when it would cut back to the live action, that Randy would turn to Poppy and be like, what is the point of this story? Why are you telling me this now as we're waiting to be picked up? And the whole representation of America with the blonde white girl, Miss America, thought it was interesting and titillating and personifies America as she seduces and kills every Black man she encounters. The only reason it's not my number 1 is I felt the animation to live action wasn't convincing. The background just looked like they're just drawing animation on a still frame of a background. But coming in number 1, I would feel is his magnum opus, his first film, Fritz the Cat from 1972. This is the first ever X-rated animated film. It's also one of the most successful independent movies, grossing $90 million. So inflation is like a lot of money.
Yeah.
The satirical and social commentaries on race, sex, drugs, and other mature themes was influential to adult animation like The Simpsons and South Park. So that is why it's number 1, because it was a game-changing film. This movie is based off a comic strip from the infamous cartoonist Robert Crumb. And the movie is about an anthropomorphic cat named Fritz, who's a college student during the 1960s free love political activism era. And as revolutionary and progressive Fritz claims to be, he really just wants to get high, get laid, and bug out. So Fritz is an anti-hero. He comes off very selfish and horny, but in reality, he's misguided and doesn't know what the he's talking about.
The one thing I did like kind of look into was that some of those parts where it just sounds like you're listening in on a conversation, it's because you are, because Bakshi actually went out and recorded like random people like in New York, like at bars, at restaurants, at this and that. And it adds this like gritty layer. You're not really supposed to be listening to this, but you are, which when you see all the sex and drugs and everything else that's involved with this movie, it kind of oddly fits.
And what they're talking about has nothing to do with the movie, but you're just intrigued. This is a precursor to what Tarantino does now. And the animation, I think, is ahead of its time for the early 70s. And the world they create with the talking animals, the illustrations of Manhattan, the other famous like New York landmarks, I thought was good. Let's get into the subtlety of the movie, or lack of it. How they make the cops actual pigs and the black characters are black crows. So I'll talk about my memorable moments is obviously the bathroom orgy. The hyperactive, like trippy animation that they use on Fritz when he smokes like 5 joints at once and he like just starts freaking out. And the bug out scene, of course, where they steal the car for a joyride. There's no flaws in this movie to me. It's a little disjointed, but it's a game changer of a film. And the guy who wanted more boobies in his cartoon movies would be like, please, because I think there was at least 33 boobies I saw in this movie.
It definitely was revolutionary for its time. First X-rated animation film. It definitely covered a lot of the more sensitive topics of the time, and there was a lot of orgy, a lot of rape, a lot of boobs. Man set out with a mission, he accomplished that mission.
So I guess I'll give my pre-eulogy. When actually this Ralph Bakshi does pass away, if you guys want to just steal this, that's totally fine. So Ralph Bakshi, your films were a perfect backdrop for horny adults and a gateway for prepubescent kids everywhere. You had a deep respect for animation and artistic integrity that shows in most of your influential work. And if the guy who demanded more boobies in cartoons were alive today, I'm sure he would say, "Damn, I'm old."
Like and subscribe, folks.